Hi, I'm Rebecca Beyer, and I'm from the business Blood and Spice Bush, which is actually right down the street from the beautiful campus of Wild Abundance, where I apprenticed almost 10 years ago now, which is pretty amazing. I've been studying plant science, herbalism, primitive skills, and homesteading crafts for the past 10 years. And I'm very excited as the person who has an undergraduate degree in soil science to share with you today Soil Science 101. And I'm really looking forward to sharing that with you. So soil science sounds pretty intimidating, but it's actually pretty simple. And when I was studying soil science at the University of Vermont in 2009, I guess it was now, I was always reminded by my instructors that we actually know very little about soil. It's kind of amazing in that it's almost a magical concoction or cake mix. If you pick up soil, it definitely looks a lot like chocolate cake mix, I think. And if you're a plant, it definitely looks like chocolate cake mix. It's really interesting, though, how little we do know about the magic and mystery of how it all works together. But we do know some things, and that's what we're going to focus on today in Soil Science 101 with Wild Abundance. So what makes a good soil? Soil has a lot of different components to it. Literally, it has many different physical parts to it, and it also has a lot of different chemical parts to it. So some of the things that make a good soil are its tilth, which is its texture or substance, whether or not it has macropores, which are spaces for air and liquid to move through soil. The ways in which the nutrients are able to be stored in soil is also very important, and how air moves through the soil allows for spaces for these things to be stored and provides adequate and easy movement of them throughout the substrate. So we're going to look at what are the different components of soil, what are the different textures of soil, and how can we look at them as gardeners and as stewards of the land to increase our plants' chances of growth. Organic soil science really comes down to one thing, and I know that's very reductive, but I've really found it to be true, and it's basically managing organic matter in soil. So organic matter is basically the rotten stuff, the dead stuff, the half-alive stuff. Think about leaf mulch, think about cover crops, think about the green rotting stuff that turns into soil. It's basically the duff of the forest floor. And because we're practitioners of permaculture, what we're doing is we're imitating the natural systems of the forest, basically in our gardens, by selectively and purposefully rotting stuff to make fluff for plants to grow out of. And that's essentially what you can think of as the basis of soil science, managing organic matter. So soil basically consists of three materials. They're called the material solids of soil. And those are clay, silt, and sand. And the ways in which you have different proportions of them in your soil and your land or in the land that you steward, that's going to determine what types of plants you can grow there, how plant nutrients are available, and how you need to treat the soil in order for it to basically provide the best possible substrate for your plants to live within. The ideal soil is 10 to 20% clay and then equal parts silt and sand, and that's called a loamy soil. You may have heard people use this word before to describe the ideal cake mix-like soil. If you pick it up in your fingers, a loam is definitely very reminiscent of a brownie or cake batter. It has a lot of air space, or those macropores I mentioned earlier, in it. And that's going to allow for water and nutrients to move freely through soil. But if there's too much sand, water will move too quickly through soil. And we see this a lot in coastal areas. Or if you live down in Florida, you may have sandy soils where water retentions are issues. Here in the Appalachian Mountains where we live, we have a lot of clay. And that causes the opposite problems. Clay has the smallest particulate size of any of the three types of soil. And that means, one, it holds nutrients really well in it. But two, it's very sticky because it has high surface area. And it causes water retention. So we get a lot more flooding and soggy, boggy areas here where we live. It's really going to be a matter of going out and checking out where you live and asking, what soil texture do I have? What ratio of clay, sand, and silt do I have? And how can I begin to understand this so I can figure out what amendments or things to add to my soil to help create the best possible gardening space? So there's a lot of different ways you can tell more about your soil scientifically, and there's a few ways you can do it yourself, which is kind of the folk method of soil science, which I enjoy personally as a folk herbalist. You can take a soil sample, which your local university or agricultural land university for us here is UNCA, University of North Carolina. They should provide you with a clear method of gathering and submitting a soil sample. It usually includes a small fee of between $12 and $24. So I also encourage you to get out and grab a handful of your soil and ask yourself the following questions about the colors of it. By noticing the colors of your soil, you can actually tell a fair bit about it in terms of its texture, or that ratio of clay, silt, and sand. If your soil is dark brown, kind of like I said before, like cake mix or brownie mix, that's a great way to tell that there is definitely a good amount of organic matter in your soil. And the best thing about that is that's basically the thing you're going for in an organic garden is high levels of organic matter. So if you see that dark kind of chocolatey forest brown color, similar to the forest florist duff, that's a great indicator of that high organic matter percentage. If your soil is red, that can often indicate a high level of clay. Here in the South, there's that red clay soil that's pretty famous in songs and poems and stories. And it's true that clay, like I said, does help retain nutrients in the soil, but it can also indicate waterlogged soil. So be aware if you see a lot of that red, thick, sticky clay soil, you're going to have to mitigate that and think about what you're planting into it. If you have very gray or olive colored soils, this definitely indicates a lot of waterlogging. The water can actually remove a lot of the color-causing particulates in soil and cause that almost washed out gray appearance. And then, of course, if you have mottled soil, which has browns, grays, and greens and other colors spotted throughout it almost like a stone, this can indicate a fluctuating groundwater table. Now, whenever I think about spaces I'm going to be farming, there are a lot of different programs we can use, like GIS-based science programs online, that allow us to look at floodplains. If you're farming a place that floods frequently, as you dig down, you might notice that there are those mottled soils. So if you look at those 4 different color codings of soil, you can kind of start putting together the story of what's already happened in the place you're about to farm and what you're going to need to do to make sure you have the best possible outcome in your farming and growing year. So I've said the word organic matter probably like 6 times already, and it's really important. So I'm going to keep saying it probably 60 more times before we're done with this class. So managing organic matter is challenging. Here in the Southeast, it often only makes up 2 to 4% of our soils. An ideal level, the basic ideal level for a soil is 5%. So we're often deficient. In other places, like up north where there's very dense forests of oak and hickory that have been dropping leaves for a long time, sometimes we can find really, really dark brown, rich soils that have even up to 8% organic matter. But here where we live in Western North Carolina, we're kind of dealing with what we've got. So we are going to imitate the forest in how we build soil. It seems easy. Just dump a bunch of leaves on the ground, then you have soil. But it's a little more complicated than that. The basis of organic matter management is putting in more organic matter than you lose. And it's kind of wild. You lose about 90% of the organic matter or carbon that you put in the first year of a soil's life, basically, because of a lot of different factors. One is sun. The sun is an incredible denitrifier. It can basically cook the nitrogen out of soil that is exposed. And 2 is water, rainfall, and weather disturbances. They can literally move soil, wash it away. So not only are we looking at what we're adding, we're also looking at when we're adding and how we're adding. And that can be manures, leaves, grass clippings, composts, and all types of other material that we are using in the imitation of nature's natural processes to build soil. I think of organic matter, just like the mineral solids we talked about earlier, as having 3 parts. And these are a little bit more hilarious, I guess, than other parts of the soil. And these parts are the living, the dead, and the very dead. It seems funny to arbitrarily assign how alive something is. And the soil, though it looks like just a clump of random debris, it's actually mostly made up of things that were either very recently alive or are still teeming with life. And sometimes you think about large creatures like earthworms that you can see with your eyes as the living components of soil, but there's really so much more. And fun fact, earthworms are actually not native to the US and have changed our soils and our forests dramatically, but that is neither here nor there. The first part of organic matter, the living section, is those tiny little beings like nematodes and basically your underground livestock herd that is eating, pooping, dying, and doing their thing, processing living matter into the dead matter that makes up much of the humus or solid physical structure of soil. The dead part is basically the cut grass, the leaves, the things that were once living but are now dead, that those living components of the soil are processing into the third part, the very dead. And that, like I said, provides kind of the bones or the structure that's going to hold up the soil. When little particles of soil come together and they press together, they create holes. And those are the pore spaces. And our organic matter has all different sizes of particles. And because of where they touch and how they touch, they're going to create a network of almost sponge cake-like texture that's going to allow for water filtration and retention of organic matter and solids and all of the other good stuff that your plant's roots are going to navigate to find. That also takes us to the fact that the more fluffy, loose, and organic matter rich your soil is, the easier time your plant's roots are going to have penetrating and exploring their region for maximum nutrient retention. So these are all reasons why organic matter is super important in our organic soil, and also brings us back to those three components of organic matter: the living, the dead, and the very dead. So organic matter is so important, like I've said 800 times, 900 times, and I'll say it 1,000 times more because it's basically my gospel. It's so important in terms of soil fertility that they've actually done studies that have shown that for every 1% you can increase your organic matter in your soil, you'll see a 12% crop increase in organic farming. And I know 12 doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a huge amount of food depending on the size of your garden. So I think supporting our organic matter in our soil needs to be top priority, and figuring out the ways in which to do that is super important. So clearly organic matter is super important. So how do we actually do things to increase the organic matter in our soils? And once again, if you forgot what organic matter is, it's basically all that good dead stuff that the forest drops on the forest floor, like leaves, sometimes animal bodies, insect bodies, and all the different beings that decompose to create the structure of the soil that we rely on to grow our food. Some of the ways we can increase organic matter in our soils are mulching. If you cover the soil, that powerful sun can't scorch all the nitrogen we've been carefully guarding right out of the soil. This also imitates the way that trees drop leaves at their own roots to kind of mulch themselves in. Mulching also helps retain moisture, so you'll have to water less, and it helps keep moisture levels correct for maximum decomposition and chemical reactions that help nutrients become more available to plants. So mulching is a really great way to help add organic matter and to retain the organic matter you do have in your soil. Other things you can do are cover cropping. Cover cropping is kind of like mulching in place. We allow a crop like oats or rye or peas or vetch or many other plants that we'll talk about in another class, Soils 102. If you're super interested in soil, you want to probably go deeper with it by sticking around for that later on. So you can actually plant crops in the ground with the intention of killing them with a scythe or a mower or a weed eater, and then allowing the dead parts of the tops to fall on the soil and rot on purpose. This action of cover cropping is basically imitating how fields replenish themselves over and over again. And we choose crops that grow quickly, produce and hold a lot of carbon, or are nitrogen fixers, which have special basically relationships with rhizobium and mycelial networks underground to create homes for bacteria that produce nitrogen, living in the soil and making it available to your plants. So those are some great ways to help increase organic matter. You can also add composts of human or animal manure, and that's right, I said human manure. I know it's a little edgy. Don't poop in your garden. But if you well compost human manure, it can be used in orcharding and small fruits and other things you're not going to directly put into your mouth. So maybe don't put human manure on your lettuces, but you know, everybody has different opinions about this stuff. And like I said, there's very few hard and fast rules in soil science. It's more like we know from observation these things might be true. And after many years of organic farming, we can say these things might be true. So, cover cropping, mulching, adding composts, and letting places rest or be fallow. I love that word. Basically allowing a garden bed or field to be fallow or not grow anything for a year allows the roots of the plants growing there, whether they're cover crops or grasses, things like that, to live and die and reproduce, and the plants to live and die and reproduce. And all those bodies piling up on each other. I know it sounds kind of grim, but nature's pretty metal, so we have to gotta stick with it. All those things piling up on each other, slowly rotting over time, are gonna produce that beautiful cake-like soil that we're always going for, that's high in organic matter.